reason I was on tape last night was because I was one of the marchers in the big Washington demonstration yesterday. And this experience was probably one of the 2 or 3 most the words are very difficult to use here. This experience was undoubtedly one of the most, such a word as interesting does not really mean much in this case. To use the word significant doesn't mean much either, because significant of what? Let's just say it was one of the 2 or 3 most difficult to assay, weigh, put into perspective days that I have ever experienced in my life. One of the 2 or 3 days. The closest day that I can think of in my experience was VE Day, or maybe even VJ Day, to the tenor, the tone, the quality of what went on and the way the people were. Now, I went down on this thing very specifically as just a marcher, just one of the people in a delegation, because I have learned through long experience and hard experience that the only real way that you ever get to have even a vague understanding about events is by, if you can possibly, be part of or in a large group, or in the group, or be in with the people to whom the event is occurring. I wonder just how much a newsman ever learns about anything, standing up on the platform. I'm curious. I listened to a lot of jazz yesterday from the newsmen, and almost all of them were up on the platform. They were in the news section, which was very, very, very much roped off from the great herd of people who walked along the streets. The great multitude who gathered under the trees and who pushed up through past the Coke stands and finally stood in front of the Lincoln Memorial. I didn't see many newsmen in that crowd. In fact, I don't recall seeing one newsman in that crowd. Another thing that I found very interesting was, well, you know, so many things happened that I'm at a loss. For one thing, going down on the bus, we left 47th Street. I rode on a bus with maybe 200,000 other people all riding on buses towards Washington, D.C. And one of the great things that happened was not more than 15 or 20 minutes after we got on the road with the bus, other buses started to pass us in the darkness. We had a very old, terrible bus. And you know, yeah, I'll tell you, have you ever ridden on a bus, a cross-town bus, all the way to Washington? I'm serious, a lot of people did. The bus that was with us was a crosstown bus. They just took the crosstown sign out, and everybody sat on those plastic seats and went all the way to Washington and back. And I mean, there wasn't an available inch in those buses that was not used. Lunches, and there was all kinds of stuff, you know, just stuff to sit on and fans to wipe the sweat off your brow, and hot, oh boy. Well, we started out, it was just a fantastic experience. That's all I can say. It was a fantasy in so many ways. There are a few occasions when your lifetime, when you are reminded of the fact of how diverse humanity really is. On the one hand, they are capable of the most incredible humanity. I hate to use such a word as humanity applied to human beings, but I say that probably only a squirrel is capable of humanity in his attitude towards people. But they are capable of things which you could not believe after having lived in an urban world in the 20th century. And, of course, they're capable of the other. And you keep seeing the other superimposed in your own mind. The other, you know what I mean by the other. But let me say, we were out on the road not more than, maybe 20 minutes. And people were in a strange mood. To begin with, I thought at first, thinking about this thing for weeks in advance, I had thought about it. I had talked with guys who were planning to go and arranging this thing, that I had all kinds of ideas in my mind about the way it would be. Just like all of us have ideas in our head about how history is. I'm sure you have ideas about how it must have been like to be in Germany in the 20s. Well, it wasn't. Not the way you think it was. I'm sure you probably thought that you have ideas of how it must have been like at the time Washington was crossing the Delaware. Forget it. It wasn't. It wasn't the way you think it was. I was not there. I just know one thing. It wasn't the way you think it was. And I have found that very few things are the way you think they are. I say that in caps. Nigeria. I spent a little time in Nigeria. It isn't the way you think it is. Let me tell you one thing about Nigeria. I'd like to do some shows on Nigeria again. There's, again, an almost incredible friendliness. Did you find this so? You know, the people in Nigeria, incredible. So much so that you're on your guard immediately. You really are. It's a funny thing about people. They're never on their guard when they are being taken apart. In short, when we meet the unfriendly, we're not only not on our guard, we are expecting it, and we accept that as the norm. The other we're worried about. Well, let me say one of the great moments was to be riding along in this bus in the sort of semi-dark. It's getting to be dawn now. Everybody's feeling rotten and tired, and there's a wild sort of peculiar excitement of the unknown. No one knew quite what to expect. And what was, I thought, quite significant, no one even talked about the event to which we were going. Now that, I think, is interesting. I waited, I listened carefully. Nobody said a word about it. They talked about the bus. They talked about the sun out there. They talked about the dawn coming up. They talked about the lunch they were carrying. They talked about their shoes hurting. They talked about everything. It was as though nobody wanted to talk about where we were going and why. And particularly the people who were really deeply involved in it, the Negroes we had with us. I'm going to say right offhand, some of the greatest people I've ever known in my life. Well, that's another story. It goes back to Nigeria and other areas of life and existence, and we can't go into that. But driving along through the darkness in the morning when the sun is coming up over the edges of the horizon, we're whistling along that turnpike, and the bus had a governor on it. Crosstown buses do, you know, and this bus had a governor, and it had a fat crosstown bus driver driving it, and he was hollering, you know, for transfers and stuff all the way, and he just normally, you know, and he was ducking imaginary cabs all the way up there and so on. But we're going along the Jersey Turnpike, and we weren't out on the turnpike more than 5 minutes when other buses started to pass us in the darkness. The peculiar rapport between the buses was insane. That our buses lumber, you know, it's obvious that you're not going to see a crosstown bus out on the Jersey Turnpike heading south unless there's something going on. You know, this bus was just not the bus headed for Paramus. Well, we're going along there, and in the darkness you see, whoo, a bus would go past, and instantly you'd see all these hands out the window waving at our bus. Our bus is waving at them. Great moment, and after a while you got so that it was just normal. A train went past us at one point. There was a train when we got down past off the Jersey Turnpike and over past Philadelphia and on through Delaware. We were skirting a railroad track, and a train went past with maybe 8 or 9 or 10 cars loaded to the gunnels with people, and the whole train was waving at our bus. And we're waving at the train, and the crew is waving out of the front of the locomotive. I'm just describing to you what exactly happened. Well, we arrived on the outskirts of Washington. By the way, this is WOR AM and FM New York. And everybody was a little... now they begin to talk about, wow, I bet we're going to be late. They never once talked about the event even when we got there. Wow, I bet we're going to be late. Boy, what a traffic jam. It's going to be a terrible traffic jam. Well, I must say parenthetically, I have never in my life, including several big operations in the Army, including a lot of organization I've seen in various other armed services and great events that happen in other cities. I've never seen anything like the way the city of Washington handled this thing. Absolutely, it'll be. I imagine in the end, this is going to be a picture book classic among control and preparation for a vast event. Fantastic. And not only that, this is another thing. every last man that I saw involved in this situation, the police, the MPs, the Red Cross people, were in the most wildly great holiday mood. You just don't expect it from officials, you know. Cops waving and hollering at you and the whole business, everybody cheering and you come in. Well, we came into Washington. I don't know how much of this has been reported. I haven't seen much of it reported in the press. Well, I think because very few reporters came in as a marcher. That's right. I know they went in days before, stayed at the hotel, and that morning they took the big cab down to the Washington Monument, or they took the cab down to the Lincoln Memorial and sat behind the ropes and started a report. Oh, boy. No wonder history, the point is always missed about what happens to things. I'll tell you. Well, we came into the city, and one of the moments I will never in my life forget, I just won't, I know it, was coming into the outskirts of Washington in this bus. A lot of people were tired. Boy, have you ever ridden 6 hours on a crosstown bus? Wow. And that seat is like a rock. And we're sweating, and the sun is beating down, and we arrived in Washington, and the police met the bus immediately. All the buses were lined up for blocks. They stopped them at the outskirts of Washington, and they took groups of 6 with a police escort to the proper place where they were to go. Each group of 6 buses was assigned a place. It was fantastic. And there was a cop waiting there with a white helmet. He took you in. All right, let's go now. Come on. And we went. And what was intriguing was to find slowly everybody in the bus is beginning to thaw. Up to this point, they'd expected, you know, people, officialdom, and all that, and they found that the officialdom was as much on their side as anybody. Everybody's going, let's go. We took off. We're riding along one of the main streets through the slums, by the way, of Washington, and here were hundreds of people on the steps. Little old ladies, grandmas, skinny kids, tough-looking guys who worked as garage mechanics, nuns. Everywhere we went, they're sitting on the porch waving with the greatest, not the kind of waving that says, go on in and give them hell, just but a strange, happy, we're glad you're here waving, and gee, you know, hi, how are you? You know, just a unbelievable feeling all the way through. And they're all out there on the steps and streets waving, and everybody in the bus, of course, is waving. And we finally arrived down at the place where we're parked. And this was a strange moment. We arrived at the place where we were parked, and thousands of buses, and, you know, we're all confused, and they took us a couple of times around the block, and finally we arrived on a side street at 20th and E, wherever the devil that is. And we arrived at 20th and E, and we're parked. And we get out, and everybody is stiff. Oh, boy, everybody was stiff, you know. We'd stopped a couple of times at gas stations on the way down. Everybody's sort of walking around stiff-legged, bent over sideways, you know. The back of your neck was hurting. And immediately, about 45 people instantly had to go to the John, immediately, which is always what happens when everybody gets off of a bus. We sort of walked around, and somebody says, well, let's go to that building over there. There was a big, gray, official-looking building standing to our right, just a very official building. And people started to go down into the driveway of this official building that had big trucks, just ordinary trucks, and guys working in there. They were not connected with the demonstration or anything, just a building working, you see. And the instant the people started to show up, it was a wild moment. They're escorting everybody in to where they can get water. Do you want any coffee? They're cheering you on. Come on. Walk through there, and we went in, and everybody was getting water. And we came back out. It was a very odd experience to have people really concerned about you. They really were worried. They were saying, gee, do you want to sit down? Do you want to, how about some coffee? Hey, get some coffee. And they were just in a building where we walked out, and then out on the street, we started to go to the area where we were all going to assemble. We were all going to assemble where our group was. Our group was to go through and to march down. I don't even remember the streets they marched down.